Good morning. Today I was going to talk a bit about what makes a great mower or even a good mower. But I'm going to first say that you should never modify your machine. This is for information, entertainment purposes only, okay? But in the general scheme of things, if you leave it in the hands of the manufacturer, you're not going to have a good mower or a great mower. But first, let's cut this apart. And what I'm talking about today is for mowing. And then another time I'll talk about for all around utility. But for the purpose and point of mowing, there's several things that if you leave it to the manufacturers, you're going to have really, really poor performance. Okay, so the reasons that is they are kneecapped by liability, etc. They're kneecapped because they have kind of a overriding circumstance where it's supposed to be as safe for the guy who just stepped upon it as the guy who's got 10,000 hours. But that automatically makes it so the guy who has 10,000 hours, who's restricted by all the stuff for the guy who's never put a foot on a mower, can't capitalize on his experience, right? Because the machine's systems are limited. Like, I've heard that there's one mower that came out, I think they'd probably done away with it by now because they probably found out the ignorance of it, that wouldn't mow in backwards. So it would kick the blades off or kill the engine I think it was that the blades could not stay rotating when you were reversed. I don't even know for sure that's true, but it would be a good example of what I'm talking about. If you've mowed for a long time, you know that you have to be able to mow in reverse. There are circumstances where that's necessary. So what makes a great mower is, well, one, I open up my decks. The decks, better examples out here, so just walk with me and ignore all of the chaos. So if you unrestrict your discharge, you're just going to get better throwout. And then you've got this temper, like when you've got a bed or something you don't want to throw into. But net, you want to perfect that airflow so that you've got main air and minion air. The minion air is the discharging material. You'll adjust your throttle a bit per conditions, and you'll adjust your speed. But what you don't want to have to adjust is this opening. You want that open because that gives you a lot of options. Then you can get your minion air, which is the vortices that lift, and that's what gives you even cut. Another factor is, if we move to the front of this machine, most manufacturers are working and moving towards where there's so much encapsulation on that deck, there's no way somebody could get hurt by coming close to the machine. Well, if you got people coming into your work envelope, first of all, you shouldn't have to worry about you in your work envelope. You should know better. And remember, this is all for entertainment. But do you see how more than likely the first thing that piece of grass is going to hit is going to be that blade edge? That's because there's a whole bunch of construct that's gone from this deck, right? So you're not going to have all of those levers from it being bent over. It will be flexed, but not with all this meat that they put in front of the deck where it's not just flexed, it's folded. You don't want that, because then you're going to have all kinds of mowing problems. Where did all that meat come from? Well, I think it's because when you have a swept edge, there is a tendency for some of the grass to slide, and then you'll have a little bit of loss of width out here. So they brought it out so that there's more of a flat face, but there was downside to that. And that now you got fold over issues, the blade. So all of this, those two functions also make this the best wet deck on the planet, in that I can mow in the middle of a pouring rain. Now, granted, it does come sometimes to what type of grass you're mowing, okay? But most of the time I'm trying to cut bahia. Most of the time I'm trying to cut it nice and high, or after it's even gone out to seed. So most of the time I'm either mowing wet. I'm always mowing wet because It's either very early in the morning when the plant has tuger, so it'll get cut without leaving a bunch of seed stalks, or it's like when the barometric pressure changes so that the plant starts opening up, or it's getting hydraulic pressure, but mostly in the morning. So then when that seed pod falls down, the microbes are more active and it will entrain that seed, and then you get the most yield from your seed on a Bahia lawn. But also the taller cutting, this capable because of this wet deck construct. So another factor aside from the deck is the balance of the machine. Net, you don't want a lot of resistance to the machine rotating, because more than anything in lawn service, you're needing to change the direction of the machine. Ideally, we want lawns where you can go the furthest without, because it's during this long straight motion and then adjustment of speed with the sticks and adjustment of the speed with the engine that we can curate our best airflow for our best cut at these higher cut heights. We're not cutting at the root because we know what kind of damage that does. So the ability to articulate or rotate or turn, that's going to be best done when you don't have these frames that are extended way out, because you got force times distance. Okay, work done is force times distance. So if you put those casters way out here and you put a big heavy deck out here, all right, in the field, if you want to test my theory, have some dude sit on the front of your machine and see how much different it works. That will be your best proof of that. Okay, so how do you make a machine that rotates quite easily, that just dances? I'd say there's a couple. It's weight balance and bias. That's why I window out my forks. That's why I take off any unnecessary stuff. Now, keep in mind, this is just for high performance mowing. I wouldn't take this out and try pushing a big old pile of hay or go busting stumps out with the front edge of that deck or anything. So, or hopping curbs or anything stupid. So, weight bias. And then another thing is, if you can ditch the saddle tanks, now you've got so much better visual perspective. You still got 5 gallons up here. I'll still cover 20 yards in a day and still have fuel left. No big deal. Everybody's circumstance is different though, okay? So you get the visual perspective when you don't have the tanks there. You're adapting for a change of weighting there by taking off weight there, but that just reduces overall weight and you still have somewhat the same balance. And then a second part of this ability to articulate is the 3 PSI tires. So get the tallest tires you can, and we need to get taller tires yet. I got 18s that I want to put on the front, but I got to build my own forks, okay? But I don't have any rears to match it without going to a tractor tire that's too heavy and too stiff. The point of the low pressure is that you have a great deal of flex. So if you're on a high side here, it doesn't unweight the other side where you're trying to put maybe a difference of one side, you may be trying to go forward, the other backwards. Another point of how a machine can rotate more easily is basically its width. The further out you stance these wheels, then the less geometrical resistance it has to, to turning. Now, these mowers are not modified in that arena at all. And I wouldn't want to. I'm just saying I wouldn't never go to anything less than a 72-inch mower because you've got the wider placement of the rear wheels. With this particular machine, you have one edge that's pretty much, the blade tips pretty much even with the wheel. So if you had a valley, you'd put this side at the bottom of that valley. If you tried putting this side at the bottom of that valley, now your wheel is riding in the valley or somewhere as close to it, but then the extension of the deck can cause a little crease line, right? So you got to know how to use your deck. Another big factor on what makes a great machine, absolutely freaking great, is something that the manufacturers are just moving completely away from, as well as the other things, is that On excavators, you have two general constructs. One is zero tail swing, one has tail swing with counterbalance, and they're for two different completely things. But on an excavator with the the bucket, the digger, the counterbalance with tail swing gives you ability to dip more and dip further out and everything else because you have counterbalance. But if you're up close to a house and you swing it and your focus is out front, then you could hit shit. Okay, the other is more like for digging septics, and you'll notice that the whole carriage and stuff on the rotator is all inboard. So the only thing sticking out is the stick. And that's so that you can get in tighter spaces. Now, which of those two circumstances is more like what we do in lawn service? Well, it'd be the zero tail swing. So the minimum amount of material sticking out beyond the operator's head, most importantly, or the wheels. Either way you want to quantify that. So what did the manufacturers do to make it easier for the without even exploring any other better circumstances or better solutions? The first thing they did was rotate the engine. They may have said, well, we can't package enough power in that so there was other ways to do it without going to the worst solution first. Now, the reason they probably did that is that they can make it easier for the mechanic, and that you do have to service the valves and such. And if it's sticking straight out the back, you remove the bumper and easy peasy. But hopefully, per every occurrence that the mechanic needs to touch this thing, there's going to be 500,000 times where that lower tail swing was a benefit. So are you going to give up 500,000 occurrences of benefit for the occasional mechanic's benefit, when on the mechanic side of things, there's other things you can change on this that help with getting into it? So like that, you saw me pick the seat up. Now with this way of doing things, and you should never modify your machine, by the way, you can easily get to almost everything in here, almost, right? But you can surely get to the top of these bumps a lot easier. So I would never trade the ease of the mechanic who doesn't just want to learn the tricks of this machine. I would be the mechanic anyway. I'll learn the tricks. I'm fine with that. For the ongoing detriment of not being able to get up closer to things and therefore have more string trimming, etc., etc. So now when I flip that seat forward, I'll show you another component of greatness on a machine is when you make it such that you can get to everything. Let's look at the converse of this. All right, here's as an original construction. Now you'll notice with these saddle tanks in here and everything, one, there's very limited space to get in on the sides, but also this bar across here that connects these two uprights. Let's see if I can get a better view on this other machine over here. That bar, it does provide for the seat set on, and reliably so, but man, it just tears you up on access. There's just, granted, these two machines I just showed, the motor are in, but they're clocked away from where they would be. That's not to lend credence to the other side of the argument we just talked about, but so where there's fixes that are better, it seems that the manufacturers have tended to go towards the worst possible solution first, and I'll talk about that down the line in another video on blowers, and how that unfolded where we don't really have what we need. So there's just a lot of room for a little bit of common sense on some of this stuff. So y'all have a good day. I'm sorry it went on so long.